Jonathan Turley, George Washington University constitutional law professor, Marc Thiessen, American Enterprise Institute scholar and a Fox News contributor, and Richard Goodstein, former advisor to Bill and Hillary Clinton's presidential campaigns and a Democratic strategist. Gentlemen, thank you to all of you. You've all been following this very closely, and there has certainly been some developments on it in the past 24 hours. So, Jonathan Turley, let me start with you. What do you make of what we've learned in terms of Manafort and the Mueller investigation, saying that they think that he has been lying to them, and it sounds like they feel like they've got a lot on him?
Well, this is pretty rare when it comes to criminal cases overall. It's not rare when it comes to Robert Mueller. He already has had problems with witnesses who have been involved in plea agreements at one stage or the other. Papadopoulos essentially became hostile to them, even as a cooperating witness, to the point that Mueller tried to increase his sentencing, which the court rejected. Corsi refused to accept a deal, according to his own accounts, because he felt that he was being told to lie. This is fairly rare. Usually these are witnesses who are desperate for deals and really would not risk ticking off a prosecutor. So clearly Mueller is not getting what he wants. The question is he getting enough to get him where he wants to go? So, Mr. Goodstein, I know that you don't believe that this is wrapping up anytime soon, and really nobody knows. Right. But one indicator is that the president has responded to the questions, and that was considered to be one of the last elements of all of this. But it does seem that the Mueller investigation is frustrated with what they're getting, as Jonathan Turley says, out of some of these witnesses. So what does that tell you?
Again, it tells me really nothing, Martha. Go back to all the statements Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, said a year ago, before Christmas last year, about how soon in early 2018, and then the middle, and then by September 1. And so, look, we don't know. The Trump people don't know. I attach zero significance to these written statements that Donald Trump has submitted. What they say, though, is that he has acceded to Robert Mueller's jurisdiction, that he basically, is a legitimate special counsel. That's it. If Robert Mueller is either look, if Donald Trump is innocent, why doesn't he sit down, put himself under oath, and say whatever he knows to Robert Mueller? That's what an innocent person does. An innocent person doesn't make up a story about what happened at the Trump Tower meeting, for example.
So you're saying you have no idea where this is going, and you don't know when the timeline is going to be over. However, you are pretty sure that the president did something wrong.
Well, what I'm saying is
that's sort of a leap, given what you just said.
He's acting like somebody who is not innocent. That's all I'm saying.
I think he's acting like somebody who's under an investigation for 2 years and isn't quite sure that he would get a fair shake if he sat down. His lawyers have clearly told him that that would probably be a perilous situation given the scope of this investigation, which seems to be quite wide. Marc Thiessen, in Trace Gallagher's excellent setup piece, he looked at the question of Julian Assange. I mean, often I think it's interesting to sort of peel back this investigation and say, what are we talking about here? Right? Like, what are they accusing the president and the campaign of doing? So when you get down to the nut of it, it's, did Julian Assange and people who were connected to the campaign get together and figure out a way to release these emails from the Clinton campaign, which were actual emails that the Clinton campaign was writing to each other, by the way, and were not really that terribly damning when you dig back in and look to them again. But that's the heart of what we're talking about here, right?
That is exactly the heart of what we're talking about here. And look, this story about Paul Manafort, I mean, the reality is that probably every inch of the city of London is covered by CCTV. So there is video of Paul Manafort either going in or not going into the Ecuadorian embassy. So that is a knowable fact as to whether he went into the Ecuadorian embassy and met with Julian Assange. So that is something that Robert Mueller or somebody can find out. But the question is not did Paul Manafort meet with Assange? Did Jerome Corsi meet with Assange? The question is was Donald Trump engaged in a criminal conspiracy with Russia? Was he connected? It doesn't matter if Corsi was connected to WikiLeaks. It matters if Donald Trump was connected to WikiLeaks. And unless Mueller can prove that Donald Trump was somehow engaged in a criminal conspiracy with Russia, then he's not going to be removed from office. It's just that simple. So we have to find out what he knows about Donald Trump's behavior, and we don't know the answer to that.
Jonathan.
Well, I think that that's a very good point. The key line here legally is whether Mueller can establish that any hacking of the emails was done before the fact with knowledge of Trump associates, or whether they became some type of accomplice after the fact. The mere allegation that political operatives wanted access to these emails from WikiLeaks is not a crime. And indeed, the status of WikiLeaks in getting this material is a greatly debated question. WikiLeaks insists that they're more of a journalistic organization than the alternative, and that may have to be litigated. But in order to really get a clear shot at the president, they need to start with a foundation in the criminal code, and that's going to require either an accomplice before the fact or after the fact, but not someone who simply wants to get access to information they've been reading about for political purposes.
Yep.
So here's a crime.
Richard.
There's a crime. Jonathan knows this because he teaches law. Misprision of felony is where you know that a crime's been committed, and we can talk about what that is. There's a long list. And you do nothing to tell the authorities, and you could take steps to conceal it, like, again, making up a story, a cover story about the Trump Tower meeting,
but what's
among
the crime?
other things.
Tell me what the crime is, Richard.
It's defrauding the United States government and the people of a fair election. 18 U.S.C. 371. Have your viewers look it up. And incidentally, we're not just talking about the Russians. We're talking about tax fraud and money laundering and bank fraud and, well, no, hold on a second.
Hold on. No, you can't just throw those in, Richard. You can't. Hold on. You're talking about tax fraud and money laundering. I guess you're pointing to the original charges against Paul Manafort that put him in jail with regard to his Ukrainian connections from a long period before he started working for the president's campaign. Is that correct?
How about the hush money that he paid to all these women? That's a campaign finance violation. I mean, the list goes on and on. You can laugh about it. It reminds me.
It's not necessarily a campaign
that case is not in not very good shape at the moment. You know, so I think whenever we have this conversation, you know, I think it's really important to step back and say, what exactly are we discussing here? And Mark, you know, I know that you've followed this for a long time, and I think this is going to be the question. Eventually, Robert Mueller's going to come forward with a report, and there's no doubt in my mind that whatever is in there, Democrats will continue to build the kind of story that Richard Goodstein just laid out, that it doesn't matter if there's no crime there. There's still stuff that is going to allow them to sink their teeth into it for the coming years.
Well, this is the huge danger for the Democrats. So the American people looked at this and said, okay, Mueller is investigating the possibility of a criminal conspiracy with Russia to affect the election results. And so if there's evidence of a criminal conspiracy, then that's one thing. Then Donald Trump will probably be impeached, and he might even be convicted in the Senate. If there is no evidence of a conspiracy that Trump was involved in with Russia, but they come up with payoffs to porn stars or some other thing like that, and they try and impeach him on that,
which would be a campaign finance violation, which usually is a fine, essentially.
Yeah. And it wouldn't necessarily be a campaign finance violation because he could have very easily not wanted to have done the payoff so his wife wouldn't find out. I mean, it's not an open and shut case. And the fact that the president is not testifying before Mueller, you cannot, under law, I'm not a lawyer, but Jonathan can confirm this, the fact that you're not willing to testify doesn't prove that you're guilty. Right. So, you know, the idea that somehow I hope that the Democrats, the nightmare for Democrats right now is that Mueller comes up with no evidence of a criminal conspiracy with Russia, but some sort of tangential evidence about campaign finance or something like that, and they go after impeachment anyway. Because what's going to happen is there's zero chance that other than a criminal conspiracy with Russia that the 2/3 of the Senate is going to convict the president, and there's going to be a huge electoral backlash from the American people, from the Trump voters, because they will see this as an effort to invalidate their votes because this was supposed to be about Russia. If it's about anything other than Russia, the Democrats are going to pay a very high price for this.
Gentlemen, I got to leave it there. I got three wonderful guests, and we will have you back because there's a lot to talk about here. Thank you very much to all of you. So.